Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Porter, and I'm joined this Independence Day by Eoin and Ciara Costelloe of Decking Awesome Games. How are we doing, guys?
Doing great.
Great, thanks.
Bit of a Celtic takeover on the podcast tonight. We've lost the Englishman Josh, and it's just the Scots and the Irish. So
that's the way we like it.
That's it. So you guys are, I say, working on a game. You're just about to release a game.
Yeah. We're just about to go onto the Kickstarter on September 13th with our dice and card game. So we're pretty excited to kind of talk about it and tell you more.
So the game itself is called Dice Summoners. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Summoners.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about how Dice Summoners works?
Yeah, sure.
So Dice Summoners is a 2-player dueling card and dice game. The dice is in the name, so that should hopefully make people remember. So you play as a summoner, and you have an army that consists of a few low-level creatures and a few low-level spells, and they're represented by cards. And these cards give you dice that you use to build up your army. So there's a central community of cards that you can draw from when you get your dice. And the real fun of the game is in the rolling of the dice, because we both enjoy dice quite a lot. And you get to decide on different strategies. So the box comes with 44 different sets of cards, but you can use different ones. Like if you like to kind of play a sneaky game, there's stealing cards and things like that. Or if you like the straightforward attack and defense, there's a good strong set you can lay out in the middle. So you get to kind of, first of all, pick the cards you want to play with, and then you get to decide on the strategy you want to go for to see if you can get rid of the other player.
Okay, so you got a bit of card dueling, bit of dice rolling. We touch deck building, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's deck building, but where you have all the cards available to you from the start. So you get, I suppose, I've always gotten a little bit frustrated with the heavy games where you have to invest a lot of time and money, because I never have the money and to invest in that. So we kind of wanted to go for something where you started out and you got the joy of building a deck without having to go find each of the cards individually.
So it's maybe worth saying that you guys are a brother-sister team. Yeah. So how did you guys get into tabletop gaming? Was it one started out in it and dragged the other into it, or is it something that you've always been invested in?
Well, kind of, because Ciara was in the same college that I was, and college is kind of where I kind of got into board games. But
I liked board games before college, but I got really into board games in college. Like, I suppose before college it was more the Game of Life and stuff like that, you know, your old school games. And then I went to college and got into they had a board game society, and they were so friendly, really nice, and I kind of got more and more comfortable, got into they covered everything though. I got loads of RPG and LARP experience and everything while I was there, so I got to try a bit of everything, and I suppose I brought it home, I suppose, as well.
That's cool. So, Dice Summoners, as we've just said, it's a card game. You got a bit of dueling dice, things like that. It strikes me that you guys have cherry picked some things that you enjoy about other games, and have whipped up something a little bit different from a lot of what's out there. What sort of influences have you drawn upon with Dice Summoners?
So yeah, there's actually quite a lot of influences from different kind of board games that we played quite a lot. The common pool of cards in the middle is kind of like Dominion, but also kind of like Hero Realms slightly. But it's a common pool of cards you have in the middle that both players kind of agree to at the start, and it doesn't change. Mm-hmm. And then it's got a set of like 3 cards per deck. And then So as the people are, so you can decide what kind of game you want to start with, and then you slowly build up your army. But instead of having like a set of cards in front of you, like you pick up 5 cards per deck, you're kind of laying the cards out in front of you. So you're kind of building up your own customized kind of hand that you can kind of play at any time. And then, of course, dice rolling, loads of games like Roll for the Galaxy and lots of other things. But we love the idea of using the dice being the source of randomness instead of like the deck of cards. Like in games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! We wanted to get that feel of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering, but with dice as the randomness, because it's easier to control that kind of randomness and always gives people like a choice of something to do on their go. And it has to be like a good choice that people get, like an actual strategic element, whether they want to build up their machine or they want to attack and use this advantage of like a good lucky roll or something like that to push their advantage. Yeah, so there's a lot of different kind of game ideas coming together, but we hope that we mix them all together so that it makes sense, and we believe it's kind of a simplified, easy to learn.
Into a lovely tabletop salad, if you will, incorporating all these. Yeah,
just enough spice.
Just enough spice. Yeah, not too much, so it's enough spice to keep it interesting. That's yeah. But that's quite an interesting thing that you mentioned about having the dice as the random element within the game, so that there's no drawing of cards in Dice Summoners. I mean, like, because you mentioned Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh! Obviously that's a big component of those games.
Yeah. So I've played Magic the Gathering, but as a teenager, I played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! That was my game. Absolutely, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! But yeah, instead of picking up 5 cards and then those are your 5 actions potentially, if you can use those 5 cards. We taught that using the dice, because dice have symbols, and then you can pair those symbols off, and you get certain like combinations of them, and you'll get more dice as the game goes on, and you get a bigger machine. That allows you to kind of give the game lots of different stages. So the beginning is kind of slow, but it's also kind of tactical. It's how you're gonna you can, if you get good rolls and you can kind of get a good strategy, you can do a lot of damage. It's not prepared, and in the mid game, people kind of have fleshed out what they're going to do or strategy, but there might be kind of problems with it. Like you might make a roll and you're not able to do anything with it, so you have to kind of be able to handle any roll that comes at you, and then at the end game you have a full-fledged machine. You can finally do your final attack. But yeah, the dice are what they don't force you to do actions, but they kind of limit your options of. If I wanted to be a very offensive player, I'm still limited by what those dice give me.
It's quite an interesting idea, actually, because Silver Tower, I say Silver Tower, the both of the new versions of Warhammer Quest, Silver Tower and Shadows over Hammerhall, use quite a similar mechanic, where for your character you've got 4. They call them hero dice. It's just like a standard D6. You roll the 4 of them at the start of your turn, and then those numbers are locked in for that turn, and you decide what you're going to do with those actions, so that rather than rolling in the instance that you want to do something and then seeing whether it succeeds or fails, as you say, there's an element of planning involved, and you do have the randomness of the dice keeping things interesting there, but you've got a certain degree of planning there, that it does mean that you've got enough randomness to keep things interesting, but you're able to mitigate some of the randomness by reacting to it. And
yeah, I think that it kind of like that, where if you don't bother to put any effort into having something happen, when a certain symbol comes up, you're always going to have a weak roll if that symbol comes up. But if you've thought about it and you've done some strategizing, you get to feel, there's a lot of advantages to not just playing a random game as well, even though there's dice involved. It's kind of...
Yeah. I think randomness is a lot more important in games than people realise. I know a lot of people just totally abhor the whole idea of random number generation in games, and they want it to, as they see it, be purely skill-based. And this is my path to victory, and this is the strategy I'm going to use, and then you just move forward with that. But I do think that there's quite a bit of skill in being able to respond to things that are beyond your control.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like a lot of people, where the randomness comes from is a bit of a mystery in a lot of cases. And That's why I believe totally that the deck is. It feels like the 52 cards in a deck. That's incredibly random. To me, it's a little bit too random. You can still get a lot of control, but there's too many times where you can pick up cards and they're not exactly what you want. But yeah, the randomness in certain games, like a lot of people think once it's dice is in the game, it's too random. It's too chaotic. There's no way of really having fun. You're kind of at the whim of the dice. But there is ways of making sure that people have legitimate choices on their go, that they can make like certain strategic choices, no matter what it is. So like even in the middle of the game, you can still make choices as to whether to how to defend with certain creatures, how to give yourself an advantage, maybe not this turn, but later on. And there's lots of things, kind of options you have available to you. And so there's a lot of things that pay off in the future and stuff like that. So I think it gives a lot more control than it does remove kind of strategy.
It's interesting you talking about the card draw thing, because I think on games where you're relying on drawing, or you draw a hand at the start of the game or whatever, those games almost always suffer from that problem of you can end up with a hand where there's just nothing you can do. Like in Magic the Gathering, they talk about mana lock, where if you've got loads of mana but you don't have any cards, you can't do anything. Or you've got loads of cards and you've got no mana, you can't do anything. And even in it's not so much a problem in Age of Sigmar Champions, the one we were talking about just before we started recording. It's a new card game that's just come out. But you can still get that problem of like, you go, right, I'm going to draw a card, and then you draw another one. You're like, no, can't do anything with that either. So it's
we were playing Lord of the Waterdeep there the other day, and there was a lot of that feel in, like, if you don't get a nice set of balanced cards at the start, you can really feel like you've lost the game a little bit, because they have such big decks in that game for the intrigue cards, and even for the missions. If you've got like really high level missions at the start, you just feel a little bit like overwhelmed. Or if you can't use your intrigue cards, like, they're the advantage you have in the game, and you feel a little like
the intrigue cards. If they were all fully the same kind of power, it would make sense. But because there's certain cards that are far more powerful, like someone will give you like an extra action, it can lead to kind of a little bit of a chaos. Like, but of course, I think that's a mechanic that they intended. That kind of randomness is kind of what they want. But it can be a little bit too random sometimes.
I love Lords of Waterdeep. I actually think that I know you just bashed it a wee bit there, but I did.
Sorry.
Lords of Waterdeep is one of my favorite games, but me and Owen have very different views on Lords of Waterdeep.
But I kind of feel like Lords of Waterdeep is a good example of a good balance of skill and randomness. You can have this plan set out for what you want to do in Lords of Waterdeep, where you right, okay, this is my Lord card, and this is the building that I control, and this is my quest, and if I do this, this, and this, that'll be fine. And then someone hits you with a mandatory quest. It totally messes up what you want to do for the rest of that turn. But the players that, in my experience, consistently win Lords of Waterdeep are able to respond effectively to things like that.
Yeah, not waste the go.
Whereas you'll get other players that as soon as you hit them with something like that, they're tearing their hair out because they don't know how to respond to this. This isn't something that they factored in for what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I love that about Lords of Waterdeep as well. The randomness kind of comes from the other players as well, which is a great sign of a good kind of worker placement game. Even obviously the worker placement is coming from the other people, but the cards, intrigue cards, and the quests and everything works together with all the players. So there's no everyone's kind of mixing together. They have to know the whole. You have to know the whole story. It's a great game.
Yeah, you need to be adaptable to play that, because even like the way that the Lord cards work, where you'll have one that's like you get 4 points for every skullduggery or arcana quest you play or whatever. You can't favour a particular type of quest whenever you play that game. It's almost as though they designed it to force players to adapt to what's happening.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, because the heroes, when you're forced to play only two specific types of cards, obviously those specific types of cards will give you like permanent buffs that are like totally different. So you'll have like the skullduggery guys will be much more kind of aggressive against other opponents. And even if you're not an aggressive person, you now have to become one, which I absolutely yeah.
Yeah. And it's that way as well of like, right, okay, you can go and do the Skullduggery Warfare quests because your lord kind of dictates that that's what you should be doing. But what are you going to do when the guy next to you figures out that those are the two quests you're going after?
Oh yeah, the last time I was playing Lords of Waterdeep, it was an absolutely terrifying moment because there's one guy who's his first time playing. He thought he was going to win, and he had to make a decision between potentially winning and 100% eliminating me from winning. So that was a really tough decision to make. But yeah, he ended up just trying to win.
Yeah, I could talk about Lords of Waterdeep all day. I love it. It's just, it's that randomness, like we were saying, where you have to be able to respond to it effectively, and it actually presents you with a whole other of interesting decisions to make. That you wouldn't have if it was just this is the game and this is how it plays, off you go.
Yeah, and it's nice that you can get that, like that they do get that out of a deck. It's because it can be so hard as well to make worker placement that little bit more interesting and fulfilling as a strategy game if there's nothing there to add the randomness.
Yeah, I think so. But it's it just ticks so many boxes. I love it. And you know, one of the nicest things about it, as much as it is a very well designed game, is the insert.
Where you have so many things. Yeah. They did think about everything, every little piece.
Because Lords of Waterdeep's been out for what? It's about 5 or 6 years, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, it's been out a while, and I say that to say how many games have come after it with similar, if not higher, component counts, and they don't bother with an insert or anything.
That's true.
These monsters design these huge games with all these little bits, and they just expect you to dump them all in a bag or heaven forfend, just dump them all into the box when you're done.
That's probably one of the reasons Lords of Waterdeep sees the table so much, is that you're not afraid to take it out. You're not afraid just to look inside that box. Because some games you look inside the box and you're like, oh, this is going to take me so long to set up.
Do you know what? As funny as that is actually a great point, and it would be interesting to talk to people about that, because it's something that I can't remember who it was. We were discussing this recently though. I was discussing this with someone. We were saying that so much of gaming. So much of anything, but in particular, because we're looking at it all the time with tabletop gaming, there's a real emphasis on convenience.
Yeah, I think that the smallest games I have get the most gameplay, like Skulls and Coup and those sorts of games. Things that are like, they're handy to get places.
Yeah. I can remember actually talking to a friend of mine several years ago when a group of us were looking to start a war games club. And one piece of advice that he gave me was that you need to keep tabs on people bringing card games to war games clubs, because he said that card games are almost always the death of war games clubs, because what happens is over time people start to get fed up with having to bring the case full of figures and the dice and the books, and then they just think to themselves, I can just bring a couple of deck boxes and I'll play a few games of that.
It's so difficult to get it right.
It's funny, but it's true. It's there's something to be said for that, and I do think that the companies that make these big war games are cottoning on to the fact, and they're trying to make their rule system streamlined with the right amount of depth, and they're even like trying to reduce the run times on a lot of their games. Like we recently did an unboxing of Games Workshop released a box set for the Kill Team variant of 40k, and that it uses more or less the same rules as 40k, but it concentrates all of the action down into like 1 or 2 squads of guys as opposed to a full army. So
was it like 100 points or 150 points?
It's something like that, yeah. So like I've not actually played with them yet, but I've got my little squad of base wolves, and it's just 5 dudes that are just kitted out. But it's it takes like half an hour to an hour to play. You only have to take 5 figures instead of 50. So yeah,
that's a big deal. Yeah,
and it gets to the meat of the actual play, which is that bit near like the end of Warhammer 40k where you have very few people and you're terrified of losing, but you have a really good chance of winning as well.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh, definitely.
that
I mean,
terrifying moment.
as much as I love Age of Sigmar, there's times where I think I've got like 80 guys on this board, and only about 20 of them are fighting at any one time. There's a wee bit of you that's like, a lot of them are just like little plastic props. They might as well be scenery, some of them, for all they're doing, whereas in Kill Team, everything's involved, right? Because you only got about 15 models on the board.
Yeah. They'll have to do their part, otherwise it's going to be chaos.
I like the nice chunk of a game where you're not stuck. Like, if a game is going horribly or it's going really great, even if it's an hour and a half long, feel a lot more like it's achievable, that you could fit it in, even if you've got to be somewhere as well.
Definitely. What sort of runtime are you guys at with Dice Summoners then?
And so 30 minutes. I think the first time you play, obviously learning the rules takes a bit longer. So at conventions, it usually runs for like 45 minutes to an hour, but it's 30 minutes once you, like, I think me and Owen can play it in under 30 minutes easy.
Yeah.
But I think we can even decide on our next move practically before we've even...
just have to figure out what the other person's doing as well. A lot of mind games. It's cool. Yeah.
We've played it hundreds of times as well.
Yeah, I mean, that does. I mean, to be fair, when you're at conventions and you're demoing, you know yourselves, you're getting dozens of questions fired at you and trying to play through the thing. So it's understandable that it would run a bit longer. But so was runtime a consideration for you guys with Dice Summoners?
Yeah, a lot of our game nights, we really love to play like short games, not like too short that you wouldn't enjoy them, but like things like Love Letter and a lot of the games we have, we really enjoy that, getting into a board game quickly, so you can like get to the enjoyable part of the game kind of almost straight away, and then just really have a great time for half an hour, but not have it drag on. And as well, I suppose it's kind of a good game for people who wouldn't be into like the heavier side of board games. So if you just want something light, or we get like a lot of like couples and stuff who play it, because it's a 2-player game. I know I'm always over 2-player games anyway. They can be quite hard to find good ones. We did think a lot about how we for this type of game, we wouldn't want it to drag on too long.
Yeah. The sort of 2-player dueling games, I feel like half an hour is a good yardstick for those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think Summoner's War as well is a good 2-player game, but that runs a good bit longer, does it?
I think 60 minutes, 50 minutes.
Yeah, something like that.
Or like Magic Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh and stuff with Ciara.
Yeah,
it's good. It's good. It's good to find. It depends on the mechanics, obviously, of the game and what you kind of want to get out of it. But it's good to also get to a certain point where, if you know who the winner is, because when it comes to like games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh, there is a certain point where you know who the winner is. There's still a chance for you to come back, but there is also that moment of, if there isn't a chance for you to come back, the game should probably be over. So so make sure we like to think that the time is managed properly, so that you're always engaged in the game. And there's never a time where you're just like you're not playing just to see the game end. That shouldn't really happen in any of your turns.
But it's so true though that there's a lot of games where I think a lot of card games are quite they can be quite bad for that in particular. Like you're saying, where you can get like 2 or 3 hands in, and then someone just throws their hands up and it's like, there's nothing I can do, and then you just end up talking about what will happen next rather than doing it.
Because you know like the general idea of where it's going, you can see the kind of curve, and you're just kind of, you've given up at that point. But yeah, the game should just end at that point. But
and we did like haven't really enjoyed 2-player games, so we don't like that in when we're playing games. So like obviously it was a big consideration to have in ours, is to not, because I do get frustrated sometimes. I can be, if I'm stuck for a few rounds and I'm like, I've clearly lost this game.
Yeah. Because some of the best player elimination games, I think, are like chess and Pocket Hive, which is like, they're so because you get to a certain point, obviously, and you've lost, but there's always a chance of coming back in a lot of these games. But in some games, there's not. Because like in chess is a great example of, it doesn't matter if you've got a horse and a bishop, you still got a chance. A horse and a bishop at night.
I mean, that's true, but at the same time, chess is very much one of those games where, I mean, I don't play enough chess to be able to do this, but I know that very practiced players can quite accurately predict what's going to happen. And sometimes they very often know several moves in advance whether they've won or lost. But that's quite an interesting consideration that you pointed out there of having the action coincide with the point at which one player or the other realizes that they've won or lost. Because like you say, it's, you know, with a lot of the card games, you know well in advance whether you've won or lost. But we played a game recently by Ankama called Brothers, and it's a 2-player tile placing game, and it says that it takes 15 minutes to play. I don't think we've ever had a game of Brothers run 15 minutes, let alone over it.
Oh, wow.
But it's because things happen so quickly in it, you don't know who's won or lost until you've placed pretty much everything. So it doesn't suffer from this, you know, the players sort of projecting how the game's going to play rather than actually playing it.
Oh yeah, you have the hidden. Yeah, having the hidden victory is a really good way of doing it. Like, yeah.
Well, it's not so much a hidden victory because it is just like 3 sets of tiles, and you're just you're basically trying to lay them in such a way that you're going to be able to place more of your tiles, and your opponent's not going to be able to place as much of theirs, because one set of the tiles is L-shaped, and one of them's just a straight line. So you can sort of hem off parts of the board if you place your things cleverly. But it's it does mean that because you are placing your tiles like that you don't know until you're placing the last few whether or not you've won. So you don't ever end up doing that thing of, oh well, if you do this, this, and this, then you'll win, so I'm just going to give up. And it's like you'd mentioned earlier about like in Lords of Waterdeep, do you play to counter what your opponent's trying to do, or do you just pursue your own objective? And this is one of the things that you're juggling in Brothers, is do I keep trying to lock off the board to him, or do I keep trying to make sure I can place my own stuff?
That's a really good idea, especially in a 2-player game. Having that kind of challenge of that choice is really good. Some people don't like it because obviously 2-player games, you tend to like to make your own machine and not like almost have no take that mechanics at all against the other person. But I think it adds a certain interesting choice into the mix, you know, because it's always tough to know how well the opponent is doing as well.
Yeah,
in these kind of scenarios,
I think interactivity is really important in games, because there are a lot of competitive games, a lot of 2-player games where it's almost like you're just playing a solo game across from the other person, and then at the end you add up some numbers.
Yeah, where there's actually the things where you can affect the other person is very, very limited. One of my favorite 2-player games of all time is Patchwork, which is an absolutely incredible game where you're picking certain sections of patches and you're trying to build your own little patch network. But the only kind of section that people are kind of competing against is picking the specific patches. Which is, so it's like there is an element of working together, but there's no way of really kind of attacking the other person or ruining their patch.
Yeah, you can take a piece, but like before them, or take one that they were eyeing up, but you can't, like, there's still a good chance that they wouldn't have got that piece.
Sure. Yeah.
When they wanted it anyway. So you don't even need the other person there for a lot of the game.
So I take it, obviously, with Dice Summoners, you've compared it to a couple of the dueling deck type games like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! Can players expect a good dose of player interactivity in Dice Summoners?
Yeah. I think I've also, if you're going to compare it to other kind of things, there's a lot of these dice rolling action games that are out there at the moment. I don't know if there's Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn, and also Star Wars Destiny. Which, although a lot of mechanics are different and they're done in a different way, ours is kind of like you roll them. It's like, our dice are like the actions, and you get a lot more dice, so there's a lot more different kind of variety. But you can also have choice in everything you do. But yeah, everything. So we have you have curses in the game, which is like a direct take that, where you give someone a curse and it will then affect their machine pretty much immediately. And then you have things like auras, which are permanent buffs, which you can give out. And we have loads. We have like 5 of each of these. We have lots of different variety in all these that people can swap in and out. And then we have obviously we have other things like you can defend with creatures, which will affect certain abilities people have. Like there's vampires that steal your health, but that doesn't work if you go through defense. But yeah, the idea of the game is that we give the person a simple setup, which is we call the balanced deck set, which is our balanced setup of the game using attack and defense creatures. And it's great for a first time. People can play it, they can get used to it, and then they slowly add in more and more cards into that common pool and start increasing the complexity and making it more engaging and making it more. So there's you're going to get lots and lots of playthroughs of this game before you get bored.
And it's very interactive with the other person. So it is very much while a lot of the mechanics are simplified compared to some of those things like Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh, it's still like directly competitive. You're trying to get through somebody else's defense. Eliminate them, yeah.
There's no nice way of putting that, is there? Yeah. So simple to learn, difficult to master. I think that's the takeaway from there.
Yeah, and fun the whole way through.
There we go. We've got a slogan now. So that's just about all we've got time for. But if people are interested in decking awesome games, and in particular Dice Summoners, where should they go?
Yeah, so if they're at Tabletop Scotland, that's the next place we're going to be. So if you can stop by, we're in the play test zone from 1:30 to 4:30, and we're going to be play testing at the event as much as we can. We also are, if you're in Ireland, you can pop us a message, and we're happy to meet up and show the game off. And our Kickstarter is going to be on the 13th of September. And you can pop onto the website dag.irish. So it's dag.irish.
There you go. And if you're in Scotland and you're not going to Tabletop Scotland, why are you not going? Is the question.
You should go.
You should go, yeah, definitely.
Decking Awesome Games are going to be there. Unlucky Frog's going to be there. Anyone who's anybody in the Scottish scene is going to be there. So get yourself up there. Come and say hi to us. We won't bite you. Well, there we are. Eoin, Ciara, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Yep. And for all of you listening, wherever you are, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Hi everyone, it's Charlotte from the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Now be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. All you need to do is search Unlucky Frog Gaming. You can also show your support for the Unlucky Frog through Patreon. To find out more information, check out our website www.unluckyfrog.com. Thanks, bye!